up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Don't Give Up the Ship podcast. This is episode 72. This is Goats After Dark Rev 3. So I've got Paul Kingsbury with me again, and Chief Bob, and he brought a friend. So we discussed a whole bunch of stuff. These ones are purposefully not aimed in a particular direction, though we did start out with answering some of the questions. Well, it was two questions, specifically the TikTok chief stuff. We kind of meandered a little bit with that because there's so much we don't know. I am probably going to reach out to the chief that did that and see if I can't get her to talk to me about it. If not on the podcast, and just like talk to me about it so that I can talk about it with a more informed viewpoint. And then talked about a bunch of stuff kind of in between about, it was some chief stuff. It was just some Navy stuff. And then at the end, we wrapped up with the Q&A question about the PFA failures, like just based on how many times COVID has postponed it. How many, a sailor asked on Reddit, how many people do you think are going to fail as a result of not just the delays and the not being able to access gyms because they're closed and all that kind of stuff, but also they're adding in the plank thing, which isn't a criteria you can fail on, I believe, but still, it's just there's a lot of change, and then there's a lot of inactivity on the part of all the people that'll be taking the test. So we talked about that a little bit at the end and wrapped up. But this is more a fly on the wall of a bunch of chiefs just sitting around having a conversation. And if that's something that appeals to you, stick around. And then if you want to like introduce yourself a little bit, since no one knows who you are, as much detail as you want. You don't got to use your name or details about like where you've been and what you've done, but just give a little bit of context.
You can get social, blood type.
Yeah.
No,
favorite color, stuff
mother's
like
maiden name, last your pin on the back of your credit card.
Sure. Do you want me to lead with that right now?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Hey, I am a submarine radio chief. I've been in the Navy for about a decade. I put on chief right around my 7-year mark in the Navy. I've done 2 deployments up north on fast attack submarines, Virginia class type. And I extended on the boat for a while. So I was on my boat for about 6 years. And I used to teach at the Dive and Drive in Groton at sub school. And now I have another position at sub school. So we're living. I'm moving up in the world.
Cool.
It's good stuff.
I dig it. All right. So, and then Chief Bob, say hi.
Hi. That's
you, Bob.
That's me.
And then we got Paul with us too. Say hi.
What's
Paul.
going on, everybody?
Save the best for last.
I'm gonna bite the pin out of the grenade and just throw it into the room right now. So the first thing, and I have some Q&A questions that I might sneak into because I don't know. Like I've been talking to people about them as I went, so I might not actually do a whole episode on them. But the first one that everybody wants to talk about is this TikTok thing, and I like got brought to my attention. I kind of sat on it for a minute after I watched it and threw up in my mouth a little bit, and then and like we'll get to. I'm not mad at her, but like. I let it simmer for a minute because it was a weird thing, and as I've gone down the rabbit hole, it's gotten even weirder for me because as far as I can tell, and I got a little more research to do. I was looking into some stuff and I couldn't find I had a guy reach out and he gave me a list of instructions that he thinks are like the policy behind the social media guide, which if you've ever seen it is a guide. It says it's a social media handbook. There's no like from to like some echelon commander signed it, whatever. Like there's nothing on it. It's just a guidebook that is full of like things that feel a whole lot like suggestions and best practices. So, and he was telling me it was that Facebook group, the Ask the Chief one, basically that, that's policy. And I was like, no, it's not, but okay. And like he gave me a list of instructions that I still have to digest to see if any of those could be considered the policy behind the guidebook, but there's nothing in that guidebook that says it's policy. So I don't know that an actual like roadmap exists for people's interaction with social media platforms as far as policy goes. Like I feel like it's all, they would use something else, like some other part of the UCMJ or like ethics or whatever to hold somebody accountable for their actions on social media, but I don't know that there's any actual social media policy, or at least that I could find. So if somebody's listening that has is jumping out of your skin right now because I'm a big idiot, that's fine. Email it to me and I'll go over it. But
we gotta get an LN. We need an actual.
But yeah, even then though, like, because I talked to my LNC a little bit about something similar a while back, and it was kind of the same thing. It's like there's not. It's all different, like UCMJ type stuff for your behavior and like what you can do in uniform and that kind of like it's all other things that would probably be all references for that a social media policy, like it'd be Ref A through whatever, you know what I mean? Like they'd all be the things that it's built on, or they would write some DOD instruction that everybody would then, fan out and do their own service specific instruction. But as far as I can tell, there's not an actual policy. So that's like the first problem, even though I want to say, isn't there a message that says you can't use TikTok? Isn't that a thing?
There was a DOD message that came out.
Yeah.
It was early 2020 that said, "Thou shalt not use TikTok."
Yeah. So that was the first problem. And I'm sure she's probably dealing with the accountability mechanism there if it wasn't just like a stern warning.
From that, like I said, from the thread that I read, that was not an issue.
Okay.
And to be honest, I haven't read it, so I don't know. Like, I can't vouch one way or the other, right? But she had made a point of saying her chain of command was fine with her making the TikTok or with making videos, with doing stuff like that with the intended purpose that she had stated of reaching out, of being accessible,
which was
relatable.
Right.
Like the intent, right, is like to be an approachable, relatable person. She took
which is great. I love
the humility side of like, so I make a corny thing and I'm a bad rapper. Like I'm not a rapper. Like of course I did. Like it wasn't meant to be like I'm going to drop the next
that's not why people
album.
had such a
no. But there's definitely
that's not why people had such a strong reaction to it though. Yeah.
No, and I've talked to you about it before too, right? Like,
go ahead.
I'm good with, like we said, her stated intent behind her platform is great. And to be honest, I have not seen any of the other videos because I've got I'm literally eating dinner while we're talking, right? Like that's the amount of time that I have.
Yeah, no, I know.
But so
I'm with you, man.
But I'm good with the idea, like assuming she has other videos that are some sort of relatable thing, right?
So am I.
And that stuff is great, and I'm 100% on board with it. But that video, I have no problems with somebody making a corny video about whatever. Personally, I don't. My biggest problem is like when I watch it, it's just my two problems with it, and I think I told you three, but really my two problems with it are it was so cringeworthy it hurts. And the fact that you and I have to have this conversation, like I haven't had any of my sailors come up to me and talk to me about it or ask me about it or make comments about it. So I haven't had to explain to anybody that works for me type deal. But the four of us are sitting here talking about it right now, which means this alone is frustrating because in my head it's like there's 100 better things that I should care about than some person made a video.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was the most egregious thing in the world. It's just annoying that come on.
I don't either, man. There's
got to be better things.
Plenty of chief misconduct out there where in the grand scheme of things, this is a blip, but this is more, I don't even consider it it's I don't know. It'd be on the fringe of misconduct. It's more just unprofessional. It's the fact that it didn't seem clear to me that even though she was trying to do those accomplish those stated goals, which I agree with. I try to do that through this podcast. But it's the first huge problem I had was associating the Chiefs Mess with that song by proxy, and that artist, if you can call her that with a straight face. Yeah. I have a giant problem with that because that's what Junior Sailors did when that went that way. It's it just didn't seem like there was a lot of awareness for how this particular thing was going to reflect on the Chiefs Mess as a whole. She was thinking about how she was going to become more relatable, which I'm all for, but there's just a responsibility to have a really acute awareness of how everything you do, especially on social media, is going to reflect on every other chief in the entire Navy, and like there is going to affect the credibility of those chiefs in their interactions with junior sailors who are going to see that type of a thing. But then, yeah, the other part of it for me was the professionalism piece. I was just like, and I want to, now that I know that she's part of that group, I'm probably going to reach out and just be like, hey, you want to talk about it? Because I feel like there's a lot more to it that is impossible for me to understand without having that conversation. But
100% you should.
Yeah, I have a really hard time arriving like to that point in the decision tree in my mind where that thing happens. But I'm trying to, and I'm glad I waited like a week, and I'm going to punt this over to Paul because I know he's got a lot to say, but like, I purposely waited for a little while because my initial reaction to stuff like that is always emotional. And so I calmed down, and you and I talked a little bit via text, and it kind of made me like approach it a little more analytically, I guess, or try to, you just detach myself and approach it, try to approach it from her side of it. And I'm a little less upset, but I'm also like, I still don't think it was the move. But I think she would probably agree with that statement at this point. But Paul?
Yeah, so the first thing I go to, when we did our last podcast together, we talked about ambassador role.
Yeah.
Right. This is kind of not the worst case, a bad case, or a good example of how not to do it. Right. So again, and to frame this even more as I think through it, when I first saw it, you approached me, you texted me, and I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about this video, right? So I'm not on TikTok.
Yeah.
I'm on Facebook. I'm on a little bit on Instagram, but Facebook and LinkedIn is where I'm mostly at. So, but then it was forwarded to me, by some guys on active duty, and I watched it, and I'm just like, oh, big OMG, right? And it just kind of, I don't know if I was pissed off. I was embarrassed for her. That was my initial thing, right? And then I was like, just my mind started racing, and it kind of put the exclamation point on things we've talked about, not only on this podcast, but things I've been concerned about. So on the individual level, the ambassador role. So I got it. You want to be accessible and relatable. Let's dial that in. Before you become accessible and relatable to the world, why don't you become accessible and relatable to your division or your shop?
Right.
That's where that's your positional authority, right? So, Will, I'm going to go to power bases and influence, right? And this is where it's at, right? This is a great case study of how that plays out. So, I even tell new chief selects, they're all like, hey, Fleet, can I get your signature? I'm like, not until you've gotten every chief in your chief's mess, your direct chief's mess first, right? That is where it matters for you. That is the group of connection power that you're going to thrive on day to day as a chief in your command. And then you build it out from there. So once you've got the relationship with the chiefs in your command, then we'll move it out right to the base and go, okay, hey, it's good to know the guy that works at PSD, or hey, the CS over there on the galley, or at the barracks, right? These key people that you're going to need to, where the common problems are, or frankly, let's extend it, that retired chief that works at the Fleet and Family Support Center, or the retired chief who works wherever, that would be a great resource to help you accomplish your day-to-day. So when you talk about accessibility and relatability, I don't think that's done on TikTok. I think that's done day-to-day, face-to-face with the people you influence in your direct sphere of influence.
I feel like it could be done. Like, I think that the problem with it is that, one, it's way too easy, even though it looked like she put a lot of effort into that video. It looked like she had like a green screen or something, but it like you guys like Grant Kahn, Jeff Bayless, you, me, that are visible in a lot of these spaces and that have a lot to say and that use these platforms to do it. It's like something like TikTok and just social media platforms in general, like, it's a really easy answer, and it's where the sailors are. It's the reason I do a podcast. It's the way you're going to reach junior sailors is through this mechanism, because they got their phones welded to their hands all the time. So like, I 100% think that was probably part of the thought process. It's just that there's a way to do it. And it's like, you have to be acutely aware of the fact that because even like I have a little disclaimer in the bottom of every episode in the show notes. It says like the speaker and all the guests like opinions do not reflect that of the Navy or the DoD or whatever. But I bet you it, like, regardless of if I added it to it, it's like, it's still going to reflect on the Chiefs Mess, on Submariners, on cooks, on the Navy, on whoever.
That's 100% what you preach the entire Chiefs season, right?
Right.
It's like you are now the representative of the entire mess, right? Like one of the things that we brought up, and it was probably a temporary bad spell, hopefully temporary. It is what it is, right? But it was literally at a training.
Yeah.
We said,
hey, Bob,
literally pull out your phone. What's up?
You sound like you're using your built-in right now or something, man. Like your audio is garbage.
You're way.
I think maybe when it scrammed,
low.
you might have lost something. I don't know what, but
it should not be.
Getting into, I was going after this accessible, relatable, and we're talking on that ambassador. I think we're getting at that piece, right? That
and then we were talking about how it's super easy to do, but there's a way to do it, right? So, and Bob was talking about something when he's broke it again.
He was touching on that. Important. We tell him during the season, right? What you do reflects on the broader mess.
Oh yeah. So the end of that story was just that, like, through the season, we pulled him up after a training and said, like, literally Google the words Navy Chief and I don't remember, something. Maybe it was just that. But like the first 4 top links were like, Navy Chief screwed this up. Navy Chief screwed this up, right? Like all these bad things. And it's, it ties into that whole, like, yes, it's just you or that screwed this up, right? Like not every Navy chief got in trouble for whatever reason, but that's not how it's portrayed. And we say that to everybody, every time a student gets a DUI, it's a Navy sailor got a DUI.
It reflects on the mess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it reflects on everybody. So I get that that's not the intent, but that whether you like it or not, that's reality.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump in there. Right. So part of my criticism, frankly, of the modern CPO mess is I think it's too inward focused. It's all about the Chiefs mess. Everything's about the Chief brand, the rise of Chief Inc. That is not what it was when I'm going to go that way and say, hey, when I got initiated.
The crusty old guy in the Navy Times article comments, that's not what it was like.
Yes. I don't consider myself crusty, but if that's it, then the crusty guy says, what needs to be said. But I don't sound like Popeye, right?
Yeah.
But no, I'm serious. It's like, so it's not just you're representing or misrepresenting the Chiefs mess. That's a message we give them all the time. But do you think her commanding officer, as the ambassador of the command like that, do you think, Russ Smith up there in the MCPON's office and the CNO, if they saw that video, that's what they want up front representing the Navy?
Right.
Do you think I don't know her family, but you're an ambassador for your family too, right? So, and I'm not saying she did anything that was criminal or anything, but as a father, those people are watching, right? So you're representing a lot of stuff beyond the Chiefs mess too. So that's why this ambassador role is critical. And again, I keep coming back to, so Will, I'm with you with accessible, right? Yes, we use these platforms.
Names, Paul, names. Just because I took my little Heidi thing off doesn't mean.
So, hey, I'm with you. Accessible is important, right?
But again,
accessible to but we're on a different mission set, right? We're trying to educate and inform, I think, right? I'm not trying to be relatable per se, right? I'm trying to put out content. I bring in people, maybe to some extent, but what I'm doing is trying to reach a broader audience. I would even say, if you're looking for someone who wants trying to be accessible and relatable and represent the entire Chief brand, then that's Russ Smith. And can you imagine the MCPON up there doing that video on behalf of the Chiefs mess? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that would be tragic.
I saw a talk they did once.
Yeah,
it's not on his line.
Felt necessary to represent that because she's not just talking about her; it's the Chief brand.
I don't think she was thinking about that. I think she was thinking of and I'd have to talk to her about it, but I think she was thinking more, if not completely, about how can I make myself more accessible. I don't think she was looking at it through the lens of how is this going to reflect. I don't see how she could have been looking at it through the lens of how is this going to reflect on the Chiefs mess. I don't see how that could have figured into the calculus just because of how outside the lines it was to me, but I don't know. It's time for you and that ridiculous mustache to chime in. I'm thinking like, so as somebody that's not really existing in the space, like I'm sure you're active on social media to some degree, but like,
of course,
kind of, yeah, just like as somebody that's probably, you know, you're not, even though you probably should put that majestic mustache on social media, like it's not, you know, I mean, you're not making TikToks, you're not going to Instagram live every 5 minutes, you're not one of those like people that has like a personal brand of any kind. So like how did you react to it as just a chief out there doing his thing?
I ran across it on that Facebook group, the Ask the Chief group, and I had to do a little digging to find it because like my Liberty Briefs show on every Friday in the afternoon. I don't know how to use the TikToks or the Snapchats. And I finally found the video and I went through it, and it looked like she obviously put a bunch of work into it, but she was kind of misguided. And the thing that I keep thinking about, listening to you guys talk is I asked a civilian that works in one of the buildings over where we work, question the other day. I was like, hey, he was in the Navy for over 30 years. He retired as a CW03 or a CW04. He was the cob of a submarine. So he was a master chief converted to a warrant officer. So I said, hey man, what was life like on submarines back before they had computers? Because the last time he was on a submarine, it was 1991. It was like the year I was born. And the conversation ended up developing into how significantly different the way we communicate with junior sailors is. Right. Yeah. And I think that's how a lot of this boils down. And the accessibility factor is obviously really important.
Right.
But being I mean, I'm a pretty young guy. I'm 21. Yeah. Right. And I've never had to resort to using social media to make my sailors feel like they can relate to me. Right. That's not a necessary thing in the sphere of work.
Yeah. So again, it's like when I was EMC Kingsbury, the people I need to influence to get the work done, that was my responsibility and that I had authority to influence, was my division. And I met them face to face and I was accessible. So I never had a need to go. That would be like me back in the day going, hey, I got to walk up and down the pier, you know, rapping the Sugar Hill Gang, you know, on why being a chief is cool. and not just the Chiefs
Gang reference.
You know,
that's amazing.
But that's the equivalent, right?
I think too that like she may have, because this is one of the questions I feel like would be the most interesting to get a response, particularly from her, is like, did she just do that thinking that was only like, because obviously the way I understand it is if you put something on TikTok, it could end up going viral or Navy viral or whatever. But like, did she just put that on TikTok thinking that her followers, which may have been just a small group of Navy peers and subordinates, were the only ones that were going to see that? And so she wasn't trying to represent herself to the Navy at large. She was trying to represent herself to her peer group, essentially. And just say, like, trying to like, hey, I can be loose and approachable or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, and then somebody shared it into the wrong group or whatever. And now it's all over Facebook and holy crap, it got out of hand.
I think she had a significant following before that started.
Did she?
I just don't know that. I'm sure it's like the same reason most sailors at any rank do something that when you look at it with hindsight, you're like, that was the dumbest thing ever. But in the moment, right. You're like, what? This isn't that big of a deal, right? Like, I'm going to put out this video. It'll be funny. Yeah. People are going to laugh at it. They'll see that I'm human and they can I can laugh at myself and they can laugh at me and it's all fine. And then they'll come talk to me and that's all good. But like, you don't step back and look at it from later on and you're like, oh, so like, there's a lot of people that actually have opinions on this. And this is turned into a bigger thing than I intended. And this is not necessarily what I wanted or meant. And like, I wasn't trying to do all these things, but that's what happened. Right. So it's the same thing every time we talk to, you know, any junior sailor, like any of our students, they get in trouble for something. And it's like, why did you do it? And it's like, well, I wasn't thinking that it was going to be this huge thing. I just thought that it was I just thought it would be a small thing.
She thought it was going to be what it is.
No.
Yeah. I can't imagine she thought it was going to develop into this.
But so I can't like turn around and hold that against her in a sense of like, well, did you think about this? And it's like, obviously not. You know, I can't think that any rational person.
Yeah, thanks.
I mean, I can't, but I also can't like be mad that's like, well, how do you think the MCPON's going to react to this? And it's like, why would the MCPON react to my TikToks?
Yeah.
Like, who cares? You know, that's never a thing.
Yeah.
I guarantee you the MCPON sees this already.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. There's no way he hasn't. But yeah,
to her credit, the MCPON has never seen anything that I've done. So maybe she's on the right track.
You're not wrong. Yeah, you're not wrong. I'm real interested to talk to her. I'm gonna see if I can make that happen. But yeah, I don't even know how much more there is to talk about in relation to this. But like, because it seems kind of like it's almost like I need her insight first. Now that I've sat and thought about it for a week, if that makes sense. Like I think Paul hit all the points that we can from the outside looking in, and then like we've kind of talked about. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the only other thing I was going to talk about, and we mentioned on that, is like what's her motivation and underlying belief system that motivates her to think this is what she needs to do, right?
Right.
I do not absolutely don't like this whole I'm a genuine, this bull crap, that's come out, the genuines and this and that. And that was a big message. The tone that was through that is, knife hand. So it's just, it's an interesting psychology going on there, frankly, not to nuke it out, but I'm gonna, you look at it and you're like, what are you thinking? What is driving you? Like your belief system about the Chiefs mess and being in the mess is represented in what you say and do, right? So this is the manifestation of what you're being told about being a chief, right? So then I go, again, when I criticize the modern mess and the process is like, what are you telling the chiefs when they come out of this initiation process about being a new chief and what it's about? And I'm telling you, we've talked about this rise of coins, t-shirts, CPO Mess branding. I get pride, but I don't see the wardroom jumping up and around doing this stuff. It's almost like we're over validating being a chief. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know if
People
that's
have
it or
too much
not.
spare
This
time.
is just maybe. But that's funny because the fleet tells me how much they're overworked and they need all the administrative stuff done, and then they have time to do this, right? So there's a dichotomy.
Yeah,
too.
I don't buy that at all. Yeah, so here the thing that I like when stuff like this, like when we talk about like the t-shirts and the pride and the whatever, I think about it like it based on there being a void in the leadership development and education spaces, which is what I always go back to. It's like we've been left to confer the values and beliefs and whatever from chief to chief over a long period of time. And I think that hasn't been done as well as it needs to be for the mission, vision, guiding principles to be what we are actually living our lives by every day professionally. And so I think what you end up with is these people that are almost like the kind of like how and why behind it got lost a little bit. And they're just doing like it's like they're playing a chief on TV, almost like they're like faking it till they make it. Cause they're like, well, I don't really know. So I'm just going to kind of do what everybody else in the room's doing. And so they're conforming to this weird culture of like, what are our real values? Like, what are we supposed to be doing? What is the mission of the Chiefs Mess? What are our priorities on a daily basis? And in the absence of like a real strong guiding like mechanism within every single individual mess or even the Navy at large, because I don't feel like I get that from any other level either, is they kind of just look around the room, read the room, and they're like, okay, this is what we're doing. And a lot of those rooms are people that are more concerned with Chiefs pride and t-shirts and fundraisers and like the stuff that is a completely tertiary thing that we do sometimes, and it's kind of almost become the primary thing. And it's like, well, okay, why? Like, why?
It's and like the over-exaggerated emphasis on the Chief Petty Officers Association involvement.
Yeah.
Or even more so, like this is something Bob and I have talked about at length, but the not just your local CPOA, like your command CPOA, but the greater area CPOA. You've got these guys that are branching out to be the treasurer of the local bases CPOA and acting as if that's the end all be all in their primary gig.
And that's one of those things that it's like coordinating the holiday party. Like, good job. I'll give you the weekend off. I might even give you a NAM, but I don't think that should be a thing on your evaluation. Like, why do I care? Like, it's a nice to have. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's great that you're involved in the CPOA and you're doing these good things. And in some way, I feel like maybe if you're doing a good job and it was that impactful and it wasn't just a thing you're putting on your eval, because like I've been a CPOA president a couple times and I didn't change the world. So I'm just like, why is that such a big deal? Because on the board, especially like on the sub side of it, I don't think it's as big of a deal. But for supply, like I sat the 7 board this year, and it's not. You're with surface sailors, so it's like I was the minority in the room. I mean, there was me and 3 other submariners, and I think there was like 16 board members. And so we're grading packages for RSs, surface LSs, and surface CSs. And when you're doing that, and when you look at their enlisted career path, those ones are like, that stuff's a huge deal to them. And I'm just like, but why? Are you guys like doing something that I'm unaware of that somehow really positively affects the CPO Mess's mission, vision, and guiding principles when we're like applying them in our everyday lives on the vessel? No. I can't. I mean, you might be able to sell it to me, but probably not.
Paul's the only one that would have like firsthand experience on it. How, as like a surface guy, right?
He just called you old, Paul. That just happened.
No, as a surface guy.
What? Go ahead. Sorry. No, I'm.
My point was more
I thought
of
it was
like
an old joke.
No. As a surface guy, so right, because there's no RSs or whatever on submarines.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm with you.
But so my point was, think of like your normal submarine, right? You've got 130 to 150 sailors, a chief's mess of 15 to 20, and your average chief season, you're going to make 3 to 5 on a good number, right? So like running the CPOA for 15 and coordinating a season for 3 is different than if you were to do that on a larger command, right? A small, any sort of big deck that's out there, right? Where you're talking like 4 to 5 plus times the number of people that you're coordinating, involving so it's, I feel like in that situation, it's probably
the CPOA doesn't run the chief season in my experience. So they just,
no.
They just cut a
separate, check. Separate, but in the same
vein. It's totally separate thing. Okay.
Being a CPOA president of 15 on a submarine that sleeps and works within 150 foot radius compared to being the CPOA president on a carrier is probably a little bit
maybe
different.
the CP, and maybe the
part of it is
does more. I don't know.
No, to your point earlier, right? So the selection board drives behavior, right? I'm telling you, if there's something that shapes behavior. So there was a time, I don't know if the precepts still say that language. I think it's out because when I was in the fleet job, I was trying to get it out. There was language that said involvement in the CPO mess.
That's still there.
It wasn't.
It's still there.
Yeah, it wasn't like granular. It was like involvement. So it's like, what the hell does that mean, right?
Yep.
So it's not leadership in the mess. It's involvement. So this is where I'm correlating that to the growth of CPO Inc., right? Where, involvement is I'm the secretary and I'm the treasurer and hey, I made the coin and I'm doing the khaki ball and all those kind of things, right? Yeah. And when you do the ranking, you've been in that when you're ranking out your chiefs and stuff, those grade sheets all have CPO Mess involvement and those jobs started to carry more weight. I think at the expense of things like technical expertise, management skills, the things that you knew to do day to day. And I think one of the conversations you should bring in is bring some older retired chiefs in and compare and contrast, what was the CPOA? What was the value placed on it? What was its role and function compared to what it is today?
Yeah.
Because I think I'm a transitory generation between that old generation and what we see now. And I think I saw these influencing factors that are creating not just CPO Inc., but the behaviors like we're seeing on this TikTok video.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely still says that stuff in the precepts and convening order and stuff where they're talking about like what they're looking for fully qualified and best qualified, which like, again, I mean, and it says it on the enlisted career pass, which when I was there, that was like, we had the precepts and convening order, but like the ECP was gospel, which is stupid because like the only of the people in that panel, the only hard and fast objective criteria for us was for CSs and LSs on submarines, you had to be qualified leading CS and leading LS. So it's like an actual qual card in CTQs. You have to be qualified, and that's a fully qualified criteria. So you could be #1 EP Sailor of the Year, but if you're not qualified leading CS or leading LS, you are not fully qualified next record. And for like that was like pulling teeth where because everything else for the surface rates was all subjective. All of it. It says criteria to advance from E6 E7, and there's a bunch of stuff listed, but it's all subjective. And then the subject matter expert that briefed the panel on what we were looking for RSs, right? It was all subjective, and it was all wildly varying because like RSs historically have a ton of top tier performers and not a lot of quotas. And then you get to like surface CSs, and it was the complete opposite. Lots of quotas and not as high of a quality of records. Like I'm not bashing them, but I mean, it wasn't even close to the surf. I wish I could have given quotas to the RSs. So, but it's all subjective though. And that's what drove me absolutely nuts was it's like, well, they have all this CPOA involvement, or evals that would say, involved in the CPOA or not. I mean, FCPOA in this case, because it was a 7 board, or involved in Sailor 360. Like, what does that mean? They show up and zone out? Like, what? Like, I need to know what that means. So but they put that in there specifically because it's in the precepts and communion letter, and then a lot of board members give them credit for it. And it's like, what is that? What does that mean? But that's a whole nother truth and reporting rabbit hole.
We use that though when you go for like midterms or for evals. It's like, hey, listen, this sheet, and I've talked about you being there, and I say like, this sheet, like when they basically say like, hey, what do I have to do to make chief? And I say, well, this sheet tells you what you have to do to make chief. What have you done and what haven't you done? Okay, you've shown up to 2 FCPOA meetings, but have you tried to run for an office? Like, let's make that more concrete. Yeah. Say that you're the treasurer, the secretary, because that's something like tangible that you can write on there. I'm not saying that it's
but it's right, like, why do I even care, man?
Like, but like Paul
that's
says,
the point.
Yeah, literally those precepts and that ECP tells them exactly what they should go do.
Yeah,
it drives behavior.
Follows that.
Exactly.
Like a Pavlovian response, right? Like,
of course.
We did it with community service, right? When they had community service on there, bam, everyone was out there, right?
Yeah. I chased after my ammo VSM on my first shore duty.
Yeah, I'm not going to fault CO, a Chiefs Mess that wants to, right? Because we want to see our people succeed. So we're going to try to give them information and resources and set them up for success. So when you look at the precepts, that's why it's so important. That has to shape what the Navy wants, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how a CPOA prepares us for a high-end fight for China, frankly, when you come down to it, right? That's what
I've been saying, man. Like, so Jason Thompson said to me that he was writing and I've said this a bunch of times lately, so I'm sorry for constantly repeating myself, but it's the example that made me start thinking the thought, like kind of going down this thought process of, he wrote I think it was a map package on a BM3 for BM2 that said, look, he doesn't have flashy collateral duties and he doesn't volunteer on weekends, but if we went to war tomorrow, this is the guy I would want with me. And I'm like, damn, like if I was on a board, I'd be like, this is the guy. Like this, I love everything about that thought process. And we start talking about why enlisted evaluations aren't like structured in a manner that evaluates someone's ability to contribute to fighting a conflict. If you're with me and we're conducting undersea warfare against an enemy, like who's the person that is best equipped to do that, and why are we not evaluating them in that way and promoting the best capable instead? Because there's there can and should and would be a mechanism if we recognize this, to recognize people for doing those things that like are extra but don't necessarily contribute to mission accomplishment as far as warfighters go. And there's a weird we'd have to decide where that line is, right? Because does a command career counselor contribute to mission accomplishment? In a way, like retention's important. I need to have those people there. I need their careers to progress in a way that makes them content and they're not worried about all those. So it's like, is it, can we reward them in a different way? Do we just call the $50 a month or whatever it is they get to be a career counselor. Cause I was a collateral duty career counselor and you get like this extra pay every month. Is that enough? Or do we have to make it seem like, oh, well, he's a career counselor and he's also pretty solid at his job and as an LPO. So that's our number one EP sailor of the year. Like just because like on a submarine, that's the largest, most important collateral duty and generally gets a lot of juice when we're doing ranking boards. And so like, is that contributing to like war fighting efficiency? I don't know. It's probably right on the line.
Tangent.
Yeah.
Like
you want to,
on a tangent.
What do you want to measure, right? You want to measure, I think, right. How the chief delivers material and operational readiness, right? So the material readiness, obviously we own that 3M system, aviation maintenance, whatever that system is. But we don't measure that at the selection board, right? Nowhere does anyone have to deliver results on, EDVR, friggin' rates, or any kind of success on maintenance material reviews, right? That would be your metric of success. And then operational readiness, right? Now, what I do know, having sat boards and sat nuke boards, I know ORS matters to nukes, right? So if you're a bull nuke, that ORS result is your measure of operational readiness to some extent. So that is a more realistic metric. But then you start getting into this window dressing of the CPOA and stuff that I think just needs to be killed off.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bob.
I was to say with the percentages and stuff that you were talking about, right? Like people aren't writing in there that my work center annually had 94% completion or whatever the case is.
Right.
Which is like a tangible, real thing that everybody has a number, but if it's not 100, why would I want to write that on there? Even if 94 is like a good realistic in the real Navy, that's a real number. That's probably really good.
Because you're not allowed to say anything even.
If it's not 100, why would I put it?
Which is ridiculous.
Because if I put 94%, there's 6% more that somebody else could write, accurate or not. Because sitting at the board when you're, you reviewed packages, were you able to look at their completion?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, imagine if you could take DERS and I don't know if they use that in the submarines, right? That's a readiness metric reporting system. Imagine if it reports it all in the surface fleet, right?
Yeah.
I should pull DERS and reports if they're entered, right? And if I pulled that data, it would tell me the story without you having to write it in the evals, right? So when you think about a fully mature selection board, and you look forward with all the technology and the analytics we have, all that stuff would be fed in. So if you were measuring a chief on their technical competence, you wouldn't have to rely on the command because, again, they're trying to get their people promoted, right? No, you need to make it more objective and less subjective. But I think the start would be – go ahead.
I was just saying, how many people, like, if you look at their CTQS reports for training – how many people are 100%? They're just killing it on CTQS attributes and, and then compare that to the reality, go follow that person for 6 months.
I was just about to say,
right. So like, even if you had, I'm not familiar with that system. So, but that doesn't mean that it's not around. There's probably lots.
Well, so I can tell you, we evaluated a ton when we go down and do our inspections, and it's like every boat I go on, everybody's 100% proficient, and like usually where they take the hit is quals because it's harder to lie about that. But it's like, you're not, come on, man, you got proficient 5 minutes ago. And then we do exams and I do like LOKs throughout the inspection. And it's like, if your training program was as good as CTQS says it is, your level of knowledge wouldn't be evaluated at below standards. So what are we doing? Like, clearly it's not effective. It's super easy to manipulate that.
But I documented that it was conducted.
Yeah, you did. You documented that your training was ineffective. Congratulations.
It's easier for a command to take the hit that their level of knowledge overall is low on a certain, like, say, warfighting topic than it is for them to take the statistical hit that they haven't been conducting the training that they're required to do.
Which is disgusting. It's like, oh, so your spreadsheet's green, but we can't effectively fight the ship. Like, why do I care? And if I'm going down to evaluate somebody, why do I care about anything other than their ability to fight the ship? Which is why I really like Crees and ORSs, because it's like, and even what I do, SMIs, it's like you go down and evaluate them. But like, I've been in this argument during COVID where I'm talking to people about like, why are we doing this right now? Because when I go down and do an SMI, I'm looking backwards in time and saying, well, you did a really bad job, instead of going, like at the beginning of a deployment and certifying them for deployment, especially for logistics. I feel like that's the move, because you want to have the parts and food on board before you go on deployment, instead of finding out halfway through that you're not good at tracking endurance. But like when they go, even the ORS is to a certain extent a QA process instead of like a preemptive look to make sure that they're actually ready to operate a reactor plant at sea. It's like they've been operating it for the whole deployment, and now we're going down and seeing if they were good at it, which I understand you need a sample size of some kind to like analyze all their records and all the admin and all the whatever, but and give them an opportunity to train and become proficient and qualified. But I just like, I'm arguing whether or not my inspection process is mission essential. And I'm like, it's not. It's not. I could go down and force multiply my ISIC and do pre-deployment certifications to make sure that they're ready to operate the ship at sea, so that they're not going out there in a COVID environment without the right parts. And now we got to violate their bubble and do all this other stuff to get them what they needed that they should have had before they left. And it's like, what are we doing? Why? Like, and so I look at it the same way when we're evaluating these types of metrics. Like, what do I care if your freaking stoplights are green? Like, are you good at your job or not? Like, and I feel like back to the eval thing, it's like, why are we not evaluating people based on their ability to fight the ship, their ability to fight hurt or compromised in some way, like their ability to overcome unexpected obstacles? Like, that thing that we would do. And because Bob was talking about it on the last Ask the Chief, where his buddy's always saying, you know what we need right now? It's a really good war when something ridiculous is going on. And he's like, why are we having this meeting? Because if we had a real good war going on, this is a thing that would just fall off the plate because it doesn't actually matter. And I'm just like, why? There's so much crap that we do. Because the first time my last submarine was a BN. It's the only one I've done. And holy good, sweet jumping Jesus, do we shoot ourselves in both of our feet every 5 minutes. Like, because we're wondering why no one gets any sleep and no one goes home. And even when we're in pre-deployment training period, which used to be called off crew, and we don't even own the submarine, and somehow I'm in the OCAB at 1900. And it's just like, what are we doing to ourselves? And it's like, there's certain things that need to happen before, like if you take 4 months off from operating a submarine, you're not going to be proficient. People are going to lose quals. Got it. So there's training and stuff, proficiency stuff that needs to happen. But like, there's so much other crap that we do that it's just like, wow, are we doing this?
White space is illegal.
Yeah, war on white space. You're not allowed to have white space in the plan of the week. It's illegal.
Oh.
It's an interesting thing. I talked to my stepdad was a Navy T. He was a SINS tech. He was a first class on Lafayette class boomers back in the 80s during the Cold War, right? Late 70s, early 80s. And when I talked to him about what the Navy was like back then, he was in Groton, right? And there were a bunch of boomers there. They were forward deployed out of Holy Loch, Scotland. And the way he talks about the off crew lifestyle is that it was a rest and relaxation period to get ready to go back out to sea and conduct a mission. And when you talk about conducting that mission, granted, I'm a fast boat guy, I said it earlier, but if you can conduct the mission, why are you not taking care of the sailors on the back end when you're not conducting the mission? You know what I mean?
White space.
And I can tell you, conducting that mission is punching holes in the ocean at 5 knots and towing a little buoy. But it's like, it's not like if World War III happened, like, yes, there'd be some things we'd have to do. But even then, it's like, come on, man. Like, it's not.
I will say, in defense
very
of the
specific
sailors,
example in this case, but
I will, in defense of the boomer sailors, if World War III breaks out, we will be super proficient and ready to fight that war.
Yeah, we will. Not maybe if a submarine tries to shoot at us or a surface ship tries to depth charge us. Maybe not. But
the routine
we'll
missions, though, they'd have to find you in the needle in a haystack at that point. But for fast boat missions, the ones that they keep getting thrown at, or all the, like, literally any ship that's just getting surged constantly. When you hear, I was reading a whole thread about people that were doing, like, it's regular to do like 9 to 12 month deployments now, right? Just repeatedly back to back to back. And there's a million reasons for that. And maybe they're needed, maybe they're not, but like the different types of missions that they're doing over and over and over, like, how proficient are they where I guarantee a boomer sailor can put warheads on foreheads in 30 minutes or less. You could just delete a continent faster than you can get a pizza.
Bank on it. That's right. That's not a knock on cooks either. I'm just pretty good at going to dive on askew. What was I going to talk? I was thinking about like, so the war on white space thing is what it's like, cause there's things where back when the off crew was actually an off crew, it's like, I'm sure there were things that went horribly wrong at sea on a submarine. And so they decided that, oh, well, we need to do more training in the off crew because they're not proficient or whatever. But it's like, there's a huge imbalance where I feel like that there could be a lot better job done by submarine squadrons and the commanding officers of those boats in just like the balance aspect and making sure that sailors are actually taken care of. Because it's like I saw more. I was on a special project submarine. I saw more undue and unnecessary stress and like mental health issues on a ballistic missile submarine than I saw on Her Majesty's ship. And I'm just like, come on, man, this shouldn't be real. And part of it was because we operated a ton, so there wasn't as much of a training period, but there was a sense of purpose because of the mission. And you didn't have to explain it to anybody, which on a BN you kind of do. And that even though it is just as important, tech kind of, I mean, like it is, but it's a harder sell. And then the part where we're at sea, we're operating, and you cross a certain point on a map, and all we're doing is operating. There's no like drills, field days, like made up reasons to do like training or to do ridiculous things with the submarine that interfere with everybody's ability to do everything that affects their sleep and quality of life and everything else. Like it's not, you cross a certain point and it's all you do is operate and be scary good at it. And that's it. And
that's the same thing.
Are we really proficient because that thing is always at sea? Yeah. Yeah. Right. You go when you're heading towards going to do a thing, it's like nothing else matters. And so it's like, why don't we do that on a BN? Like it's a pretty important mission set in the grand strategic level view of things.
It brings what we're talking about brings a pretty interesting point up to me when I think about it. In the realm of training submariners how to fight submarines, we have 50 plus years of operational experience in the exact same missions, right? The things that we do around the world are pretty consistent on what our ships are going out to do on a regular basis. So at the end of the day, when you're certifying a submarine on what they're about to do, it's something that they should know, that they should never be surprised about what they're going to be evaluated on.
Right.
So the things that we evaluate warfighters on, like how do you mix that up? How do you create a situation that's going to throw the 24-year A-gang senior chief pilot, like throw him something that he's never seen before? You shouldn't be able to do that, right? It's weird.
And yeah, I mean, there's going to be times where that person that's in that chair doesn't have that experience yet. But outside of that, I mean, you shouldn't. But I also feel like that person will probably be more surprised more often than they should be, because instead of doing the things that they should be training on and spending those times getting proficiency on, we're a lot of times distracted by other stuff. And so because I've heard a lot about like what used to be palm cert and stuff for fast boats turned into something else where it's like they're really not doing the same thorough evaluation and certification process before a fast boat goes on deployment. So it's like, or if they're whatever they are doing, it's like it doesn't really matter how you do, you're still going to go to sea because of the demand for those things to be at sea. So it's like we're getting to this point where we're going to be in a position where we have to fight the ship, and it's like, I can't do that with PowerPoint. Like, my Excel spreadsheet's not going to make me a more efficient warfighter. Ruh-roh. You know, like it's go ahead.
So I was just so Paul, like you're the 1/4 of this group that's not a submariner, but in having carrier experience and all that stuff, right? Where you have kind of maybe not a multitude, I don't know, of mission sets that you can go do, right? Like most of us, like a BN has one mission set that they train for and do over and over and over. Fast boats have a couple of different ones, but it's the same like grab bag of 3 or 4 that they're probably going to go do. But is it the same idea with surface ships that like, do you still have the same couple, or is it like, could every mission be totally different? Like, how does the rest of the Navy prepare for these things?
Yeah. So the mission and the application of the skill sets on the board, you know what I mean? So if I'm on an LPD, you know, I've got the ability to launch and recover LCACs, you know, helos and different aircraft. So you're going to do that regardless. It's just where you apply that in the operational theater, right? So I think that's, you know, it's not like you take an LPD, some we have, but very rarely do you transform it completely into something. You don't take an aircraft carrier and make it go do well deck ops, right? So you take an aircraft carrier, it's proficient in that function, it goes through a certification cycle unique to that mission, and then you take it where it needs to go. And yeah, when you're deployed, you can spin off a DDG and it could go do, you know, some kind of other operations
like drug interdiction
VBSS.
or something.
Yeah. But they're trained in that, right? The people that they need to do that mission, if needed, are already trained and certified in that. What I see more is, and again, not proven in science, you know, we talk about having a nuclear Navy. I think we really have a nuclear Navy now, right? So I think this is all very nuclear power in its approach, very administrative controls, heavy reliance on administrative compliance and processes that just, you know, I got it. Some of that's, and I've even written about the overuse of that nuclear power, right? It's like, okay, hey, these back in the day when Rickover was there, you know, I got it. The risk was a bit higher, right? You know, new technology, not proven with a million billion miles of underway on nuclear power, but the technology's improved, the training's improved. You would think some of that risk management would start to back off some of the controls of additional, and a lot of those are found in administrative processes. So I think you've seen that creep because a lot of senior nuclear trained officers are not just the commanding officers of submarines. They're 4-star admirals now. They're this chief of naval operations. So I think that mentality, and there's a lot of great things that come out of naval nuclear power program, you know, Watts-Name principles and stuff, but you go back to what you know, right? So if I'm a senior commander, I go back to, well, I want to verify it with inspections, administrative requirements, reporting requirements. And I think there's a piece to it. And I think the other part is this is kind of a symptom of a peacetime Navy when you have the luxury.
Yeah.
Right? Seriously, to your point about going to war. When you go to war, look at World War II sailors, right? They're friggin', you think they're worried about looking all good? It's not what you look like, it's what you do. I mean, we weren't worried about how good you look in uniform. It was like, can you go out and fight the ship and win kind of thing. So I think there's a lot going there that needs to be adjusted for. Hopefully we don't. Hopefully we deter high-end warfare with China. But if we get into it, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be, and we're going to lose stuff.
It's going to be real. And I'm going to say it's going to be real interesting thinking about this as a thought experiment. Obviously I don't want it to happen. And it's interesting is going to be the last word I would use to describe all the terrible stuff that would happen. But it's like, I think there's going to be like a World War II style adaptation period where we went from like a surface centered Navy to, hey, look, submarines work better. And like where we're churning out all these submarines to go sink all this tonnage, and then ships turned more into like
Space Force.
Into like, into like a bombarding shore targets. But it's like, there's going to be a huge learning curve.
Yeah, we think about the Navy. I mean, this is kind of sidebar, but you know, World War II was a heavy naval battle. But I mean, to the point you just made, right? This is going to be fought in space, cyber. You know, before ships get to the fight, it's going to light up in cyber, and you can reach the homeland, right? It's like a strategic weapon now, right? I can do a lot of damage with cyber and space, and I can inflict cost to the nation without even bringing the Navy forward. So. Right. You know, it's kind of not interesting. It does keep me up at night thinking about what that looks like.
It's ready to retire. That's for sure.
A few years back, the Commandant of the Marine Corps was at a congressional hearing, and he had a quote. I can't cite it right now, but it was something to the effect of, he was asked where he would like to see congressional funding best spent in the military, and he said in submarines. Right. And he asked for more submarines because there's no way Marines are ever going to lay foot on land in a foreign country in a major conflict without that type of battle ready boat to clear the way. You know what I mean?
And that's
so,
I good.
No, I was just say so with that, like like the Space Force has become the new like Coast Guard of what people of the military, right? Like everybody likes to pick on the Coast Guard, right?
Yeah.
And I honestly have zero things against the Coast Guard.
Have you watched that Steve Carroll show, Space Force?
Yeah.
Oh, that was fantastic.
Yeah, no, I love
it's
it.
So good.
I have heard though from a few people that it's funnier if you're in the military. If you're not in the military, it's not as funny because you don't get some of the dumb jokes, right? Like seeing a 1-star is the dumb assistant,
like the aide,
secretary. Yeah, like
right.
Make
and
sense
then
until you've seen an XO.
That doesn't make
submarine.
sense. Like that dichotomy is not as funny to people outside the military, but more for Paul, right? Like I got it that the Space Force is probably a little after your active time, but you have a different perspective on the Navy and the way things work from where like I do. So obviously the Space Force is an easy target as far as making fun of that stuff. Personally, it started as devil's advocate, but now I think I've convinced myself that I think it's actually a really good idea as much as I made fun of it initially. Like I think maybe not the title, all that stuff might be quite.
It should have just been the Air Force, yeah. But the idea,
but I've in my head I've made up a reason why it should be its own branch, and I could be way off on it. But outside of that tangent, the like you said, those wars, future wars aren't going to be guys digging trenches and like storming beaches with just more guns than the other people. Like it's unnecessary. It's expensive. It's deadly. Like that's crazy when you could do it all from a secure building with a couple of computers and some really smart people, and you can cause just as much damage to another country if you're trying to actually have a war with them. Right. But so like in my head, I get that Space Force isn't literally just launching rockets into space, right? It also kind of covers the cyber side of things. But from your perspective and where you've been at and where you are at, Paul, like does the Space Force, like, is it just as much of the butt of a joke to you, or does it actually make sense? Or do you have any different insight or opinion on any of that?
No. So I've had the opportunity to kind of talk to the senior enlisted leader, Master Gun Scott Stalker. He's the SEL for Spacecom, and on my non-commissioned officer's side, I had him on talking a bit about it. But like I said, so we are networked Navy, we're connected. You know that the Boomer mission you talked about, right? It doesn't operate. It starts in space, right? I mean,
yeah.
And I don't know the redundancies, but I know there's a command and control system with that capability that scares me, that if it's held at risk, what that looks like, right? So where do you protect that? You got to protect that in space. And we've shown that we're heavily reliant, not just as a military, but as a nation, on GPS. China has shown they can shoot stuff down. We've shown we can shoot stuff down. So what are you going to attack first? And, the things I've read about, not super in depth, I'm not reading that much, but when you look at Chinese strategy, they're like attack the nodes and the communication, right? So you break the nodes that connect you together, and that's all communication and satellites and things like that. So it absolutely is a warfighting area that we got to develop. And I think I've read some books. The author's name is slipping me. It's Dave Poyer or Stephen Poyer, I think it is. He writes a series about the war with China and America.
I've read a synopsis of the concept and stuff. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, and he's a retired, surface warfare officer. And I mean, when I read it as having been in the Navy, I'm like, okay, I'm convinced. I'm not reading some, you've seen TV shows and read books where like this guy has no clue what he's talking about. This guy knows what he's talking about.
Like Hunter Killer, for instance.
Yes, and right from the beginning,
right here like a catfish.
Yes, before naval forces get in there, right? It's all the satellites are taken down. The cyber, they're cyber attacking the homeland. We're taking theirs down. And then, there's, as right, the nuclear space or strategic space. I wouldn't say just nuclear. There's a lot of options from EMP all the way up. So
yeah,
how you use those things.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say it is definitely a valid warfighting area.
Yeah, for sure.
What I'll say is there's a book that I've read through, apparently not very much according to, it was an ebook that I downloaded. And of course, Apple likes to track the percent completion of it, right?
Yeah, to tell you how crappy you are at reading books.
Yeah, you feel like you've read a lot of it, and then it's like, oh, well, apparently I've only read 11%.
Yeah.
But it's called Dark Territory, and it's the secret history of cyber war. This guy, Fred Kaplan, is the author. But he starts off like way back with talking about like Reagan watched, what was the name? Was it the name of the movie War Games? What was the one where the guy thinks he's playing a video game, but he accidentally...
It's the one with Ferris Bueller. Yeah. It's War Games.
He thinks he's playing
I love that movie.
Yeah, thinks he's playing a video game, but almost accidentally starts World War III, right? So I apparently like Reagan was watching that movie and then went and talked to his aides afterwards and was like, hey, is that like a real thing? Like, could somebody actually hack into that? And it's like, that can't be real, right? And his aides came back and went, actually, no, 100%. That's actually totally possible. And so that's when they started taking a lot of the cyber warfare seriously. And in the 11% apparently that I've made it through, they've gone into like...
Terrifying that Matthew Broderick was responsible for closing that loophole.
Right. But hey, you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's what happens when you elect an actor for a president.
You're not wrong.
But it was still like a valid question that fixed a lot of things, right? So, but anyways, he later in it, I don't remember which, it went down some anecdote of like during Desert Storm, they basically said like, hey, we need to go attack these people. We need to go attack this. And it was like, we don't have to send people in and like cause this big thing and spend a bunch of money on warheads to like blow up power transformers, right? Like communications are a huge thing with any war. From, I'm sure like Sun Tzu said the same thing, that like communications are a huge deal. But when you go back far enough, it was like, I don't have to shoot tomahawks to blow up their power and these comm centers. Like we can just have somebody hack in and screw them up one way or another. It costs effectively no dollars compared to 20 tomahawks, and the end goal was the same with no collateral damage. You didn't accidentally shoot a school full of a bunch of civilian kids. Like you just took down a power grid, but that accomplished what you needed. And it's much less intrusive, noisy, bloody, all that. And so I feel like there's a lot of situations that it's harder to justify people doing things that you could do with robots, machines, computers.
Right.
When okay, sure, we lost a drone plane. Yes, that plane was $1 million, but I didn't lose any people, which is huge. And you now you can scientifically just create a better drone, as opposed to, I can't scientifically create a better Marine to go do these things. You know what I mean? So it seems like,
not yet.
Sure,
they're working on that Captain America formula. All right.
But like in paper dollars, sure, it might be more, right? But outside of that, it just seems more effective if you can get the same result with fewer casualties and fewer just other disruptions. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? It seems like, to me, looking at it like in the future,
right,
like, of course I want an entire war fought on a computer. I don't really want that at all, but like, I enjoy being able to use my computer the way I do. But,
yeah.
but like in a war though, right? Like I'd rather be like, hey, we got to go sit down and figure this stuff out on a computer, as opposed to, I got to give you 80 pounds of armor and a rucksack, and you got to go march 20 miles and then go shoot a bunch of guns and then hope that a helo can come in and save you if necessary. Like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah, you want to be disturbed by some of this stuff? Go watch that Spycraft series on Netflix.
Yeah.
I spent like $130 on Silent Pocket so that I could like put all my stuff in like Faraday bags and stuff now when I go to the airport. Like, it's sketchy. Some of the stuff they can do. Like, even the thing that was covering my camera on my computer, it's like these little like see if I can show you. I don't know if you can see it. There's like a little sticker thing covering my camera. I got like reusable like labels for all my crap now. Actually, I have them sitting here so you can like, I got all the stupid card holders and like these things are like reusable covers for like cell phone cameras and stuff, so you can like take it on, use it, and put it back. And I'm just like, I got this is like what's holding my iPad right now. It's like this Faraday bag, so like when you have it in there, nothing can get out. So it's like or in or out, right? So it's like because they were talking about like they're like siphoning off all your data when you walk through that stupid little like tunnel area to the baggage claim, and I'm just like, I always wondered why it was shaped that way. I was like, this is super weird.
I think that there's a lot like the worst part and the best part about that. Like, I think it's intriguing. I understand the privacy concerns and all these other issues, right? But like, I think the craziest part to me is realizing that just because you don't know it exists doesn't mean it doesn't. And just because you don't think that it's possible doesn't mean that it's not possible, right? Like, we're the US and we spend more money on defense and military than any other country combined tenfold, whatever the numbers are right now. But like, if you don't think that the government is trying to come up with some insane new way to do something that you didn't even remotely think was possible, I think you're crazy. I think I can guarantee
that's
some
what DARPA's
pieces,
for, dude. Google it.
Right. Like, I can guarantee some pieces, right?
Yeah,
but like,
it's wild.
But there's a lot of pieces that I don't know about that I have no idea would even remotely be possible. But even what I do know is possible that other people don't know remotely exists. Just if I take that small anecdotal example and extrapolate it across the rest of the Navy, like, there's probably all kinds of wild stuff out there that the government can do that I have no idea about. So to think that we can or can't, just to assume that we can do something insane that I can't even imagine, but then to think that no other country is trying that, I think is naive. Like, I feel like you have to assume if you know that we can do it, you have to assume that somebody else on this planet has thought of it and spent some money towards making that happen. And in the world of cyber warfare, right? Like, it takes a smart person with a $300 laptop from Best Buy and they can do the craziest stuff. Like that, it doesn't require somebody to develop a brand new intercontinental ballistic missile that, like, with proof of concept flights, like, it just requires some smart guy with a laptop and they can do just as much damage. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, and phones even like are way more powerful than people think they are too. It's weird. I don't know how to use any of the functionality, but somebody
I can only imagine, like, I'm sure, like, when you went through
like
the
our
ranks,
brain,
Paul, like, how often, as you were going up to the ranks, right? Like, you started off with nuclear power, which is cool and crazy enough. Like, as a submariner, I'm pretty desensitized to it, right? Everything's nuclear power. Who cares? Hot steam, hot rock makes steam make boat go. But, but like, as you moved up through everything, like, you had to have been at some point involved in something and read into something where you were like, oh, wow, like, that's real. Like, we can do that. I mean, I'm not obviously asking for details, but like, there's got to be stuff that, that you weren't expecting.
Probably not till I got to the fleet. Yeah. Probably not to the fleet mass chief level. I would see some stuff, but still, even at that level, you know, of compartmentalized information and there's a level, like several levels above that. Right. So I just always come back to, like, to your point about there's smart people in this country that are doing smart things that we don't know about. And frankly, I don't even want to know about, you know, I don't have a need to know.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. But at our level, when it comes down to all that stuff, just have confidence that it's probably happening. It's always happened. Go back to World War II, go back to Persian Gulf War, just the things we do now, right? There's people that think through these problems, and, you know, the China scenario or the Korea scenario, there's smart minds on that are figuring that out, right?
Right.
And it's cool to talk about that, but at the end of the day, back to the deck plate chief, right? Your job is to make sure that ship is materially ready, that boat is materially ready to deliver when we need it to, right? And we may not need it to. And by the way, I thought it was Submariner, not Submariner, because I was always
Submariner.
told.
I was thinking it when he said it.
Yeah, I was always counseled that
he should have come off the top rope, but he didn't.
Yes, you're above average mariners.
I've heard both, and my favorite is that I will use them interchangeably and say interchangeably
because somebody's going to get upset. It doesn't matter how you say it.
Yeah, no, you're going to met half the fleet says one, half the fleet says the other. And so as soon as I find somebody annoyed by the way I say it, so I will forever say Submariner now. Just to bother.
Yeah, it's like Airedale's calling carriers boats. You know, it's like, no, their boats and ships are different, and there's reasons why we call them different, but we'll call it a boat boats for you guys.
And targets. So I'm going to shift gears slightly, and then just so you guys know, my wife's on her way home and she had a really bad day, so I'm going to have to like quickly log off whenever she gets home. I'm waiting on a text.
Yeah, and I'm getting ready. I'm getting pressure to wrap up too because the boys want to come up and play Xbox.
Yeah, and so this one should be relatively quick, but it was one of the Q&A questions I got on Reddit. It was, how many people do you think are going to fail the PRT whenever it comes back?
Ooh.
How bad do you think that's going to be? So, Paul, if you're not tracking, they've been kicking the can down the road on PFAs, like just delaying. We haven't done one in a year and a half. And they've kicked the can down the road to July now, I think. Or June.
Yeah, I heard. I've been tracking that. I know that they kind of pushed it to the side. I know that basically all the services did. I know Marine Corps just recently brought it back. Yeah.
How
I knew on active duty.
Yeah, in the Navy especially.
Yeah, when you don't have the incentive of the 3 Mile Club, probably a lot.
Yeah, I think it's going to be rough, but go ahead, Paul.
My thoughts on it are the back to the CTQS example, right? Like, are you talking about actual failures? Or are you talking about documented failures?
Or like wink, wink.
Yeah,
dude. I think they might, because by virtue of it being the first plank cycle too, they might come up with some weird like waiver thing at the last minute when they realize everything's going horribly wrong.
They already stated that like it won't count if you fail it. It won't count as like a failure towards like the getting kicked out failure numbers that you can have.
I thought it. Or did they? I thought it was just if you failed planks, because planks are new. Like they're giving you like a freebie.
Okay, yeah. So
it's just planks. Okay, yeah. I feel like so what Bob's saying, that they would come out with something saying like, we're gonna do a PRT, but if you fail, it doesn't actually matter because we haven't done one in so long, like before or something like that.
In my humble opinion, planks are pretty ungovernable, right? So you have to put your elbows on the deck and you have to have your fists out in front of you, and they can't be touching each other, so you can't make that tight V. So we've all done PRTs before, so you know what it looks like when somebody's not doing a proper push-up, so on and so forth. But with a plank, like, you're required to keep your back straight the entire time. The reason I say it's ungovernable is because we all know what large-scale PRTs look like. There's going to be a significant portion of the Navy that's not going to be able to accomplish the base portion of that. Also, on the topic of PRTs, while I think that physical fitness is incredibly important to, your mental health and your physical readiness in the fleet and so on and so forth, but how many people have we seen in our time in the Navy get kicked out just because of physical fitness, but they were fantastic technicians. They were, great at their jobs, but because we use an antiquated way to measure body composition, like what are we doing?
I think me and Bob, we're talking about it, like how, and I think Mick Pond Stevens, I think it was him, talked about it for a little while. It was like a Navy Times story, and then it just kind of faded away as he retired. It was where he was talking about doing effectively like a combat fitness test, but like basically creating a PRT for each warfare community. So like for submarines, you need to be able to run around the submarine with a FFE and SCBA on and be able to fit through all the hatches and climb up and down all the ladders effectively. And you know what I mean? Like, and fit with all that gear on and not like fall out or be sucking so much air that your SCBA runs out in 90 seconds. So it's like that would be an effective metric where it's like, if you can eat your feelings and still traverse the entire submarine in an FFE and SCBA and go up on down all the ladders and fit through all the holes and not run out of air, then got it. You're fit to submarine. But it's like that. It would make a lot more sense if our test was structured in that way, because why do I need to be able to run a 1.5 miles in 13.5 minutes or whatever it is? It's like, I can't run a 1.5 miles on a submarine nose to nose ever. So it's like, what are we and I'm never going to have to do that. I might have to physically exert myself in a different kind of a way, and with my breathing restricted, sucking rubber, like doing what we do on submarines like that. It should be structured in a way where maybe I'm doing EAB races, or maybe that's one of it. Like maybe we're doing something like that, where the most I'm ever in the conduct of my duty, the most I'm ever going to have to physically exert myself is when I'm sucking rubber, combating a casualty in whatever way you want to mold that test, or during a food load. Like, if I'm being honest, like I sweat the most when I'm humping food during a food load.
It's so hard to look at it from both perspectives, because a culture of fitness is an incredibly important thing throughout the military, right? Like,
right. I agree.
You look at the Barb, they put boots on ground in a foreign country, right? During World War II. And those dudes, they were probably very much so ready to fight human beings when they got there. So I always tell my junior sailors, you get your fitness on lock and you'll be ready to do everything that you need to do. And,
everything. Yeah. And I think the culture of fitness thing is really important, but I think it would need to be wired in a way where, one, you gotta prioritize time, like, because you can say it's important, but if you don't spend the currency of time in our plan of the week, plan of the day, allowing me to do that as part of the work day, and you're just telling me this is a thing I should do in the free time that I don't have, it's not going to happen. We're going to end up being the fattest branch of the military on some like Duffel blog article or whatever. It's like, you're not going to have the benefits that you want just by saying it. You have to act and devote some kind of resources to it. And the most meaningful resource to sailors is time. It's like liberty. So if you're going to say that I don't got to actually be on the deck plate ready to work until 09 and I can PT in the morning like Marines do, I'm in. And most people, I think you'll see a drastic uptick in people taking advantage of that time and doing that. And I don't think it's ever going to happen either. Like, so I'm just like,
no, because an XO somewhere is going to have to cut some training out of his white space time.
Right.
Like,
exactly. And
so instead the argument is you can go work out before work. You just have to go to the, you have to get to the gym
in the morning.
Yeah. You got to get to the gym at 3:30 and you can get a solid hour. Then you can shower and you can change. You can put on your uniform and you can show up. Blah, blah, blah. Because we have 12 sessions of training today.
I applied for a pretty sweet gig for radioman where I was going to go jump out of planes with a radio and a gun, and I got accepted to that command. But
I had a buddy do that.
Yeah, so during that entire time frame where I flew down there and I did the whole deal on the boat, though I was in a sweet spot where I was able to leave for lunch at like 10 o'clock, go work out for 45 minutes at the base gym, come back, get my shower in, eat lunch, and then get back to work. I feel like honestly, this all boils back down to the chief, and that if the chief's able to manage the division's time and use that currency that you're talking about that it can really be part of our lifestyle.
It can. I don't know how much control, like, because I definitely did that a lot when I was on my last boat, and even on the one before that as a chief. It was like I got it in where I could, like, if we were in port and we weren't loading food and we weren't doing anything crazy except kind of operating and supporting what the boat had going on, getting ready to deploy again. It was like I'd look at a guy each day of the week and be like, hey, you have dental today, wink wink, like you need to leave by noon to go to your dental appointment that you don't have. So it's like, because I wouldn't have been able to sell a lot of people like that XO you're talking about on those guys having that type of a schedule. Like, hey, I'm going to rotate guys out where I only have like, and sometimes I do it with 2 people if we didn't have anything going on except lunch, and clean up, and then the duty guys got dinner and I've got meetings and stuff, but the rest of the division is just there because they're supposed to be. It's like, I'd have, hey, you got dental and you are going to go help somebody with something at I don't know. You're going to go, I'd make up an appointment. You're going to go pick up an open purchase or whatever. It would like just make some stuff up. And that's where they are if the cob asks. So like he would ask me or he would ask them. They're at dental or they're at this. But then I had a cob and it was pretty much only during the shipyard period, I want to say, not to say that he wouldn't have done it otherwise, but by 1300, the day after duty, you were off the submarine PTing. And it's like he understood that most people weren't going to the gym. But it was, if you had duty the prior day, like your chief had to clear it with the cob if that sailor was going to be on the submarine past 1300. And it was amazing. And like the crew responded to, and like shipyard couldn't bring down new work after 1500, or he'd just shut it. The duty chief and duty officer would just say no. Like, so the duty section wasn't up until god awful hours trying to do some kind of thing to prep for their stupid work that they didn't plan for.
But like half of what you just said though was like the wink, wink, nod, nod to get around.
Yeah.
It, right. Where like the idea is you should be able to go to your,
I shouldn't have to wink, wink, nod, nod. Yeah.
Exactly. And say, hey, this culture of fitness thing that the Navy has put out is a real thing.
Yeah.
And we all agreed to follow the Navy's rules. So like I have a sailor who wants to go work out for an hour and they're like, nope. Is he 100% on his CTQS training this week? Yeah. What about all of his 12 collaterals?
Right.
Nope.
Right. Everything else is
can't
more
support.
Important. Yeah.
And then we're like,
Chiefs Mess.
I mean, half the time FEP is even.
Yeah. The Chiefs Mess shows each year that they can invest in physical fitness. So we're all in during initiation season with new chief selects, right? We're out there.
Got him.
Chiefs Mess.
Got him, coach.
And then it doesn't. And where does that translate to the day to day, right? So again, it's another say-do gap, right? You'll huddle all these chiefs and friggin' get all new chief selects and say it's all matters. But then the day to day, you don't translate into your division. So I think you, as a chief petty officer, you have the space to do it. You don't need to wait for the wardroom to tell you to do it. Make it a priority like you do during initiation season and make it happen.
Yeah. And the harder part is when you're operating at sea, like it's with the 8-hour watches, even you have more time, but it's like you don't. Like, it's weird. It's like you stand more watch now, and your offgoing's longer, but that's just more time for me to cram stuff in the plan of the week. And so that's what you see inevitably happen is these guys, like during their, what's supposed to be their sleeping period, they'll get more than 4 hours of sleep, which they got on 6-hour watches if they were lucky, but it's like at they still are getting punched in the face longer during their offgoing as well.
Yeah. Ideally, you want to help develop the self-discipline in the sailor that they do this on their own. Because you're right. There's the reality. We're not always peer-side where we can get together in a big huddle and run around the base. And that doesn't work for everyone anyhow, or you have access to a base gym. But if I'm on a boomer, from what I've heard, there's some things you can do there.
There's a lot. There's a lot. You know what I mean? We had a Smith machine, dude. I used to deadlift and squat. It was ridiculous. Yeah. But you have to have the discipline to spend your sleep time doing those things, because what happens is my entire offgoing is choked out by collateral duties and cleanup and drills and training and meetings and whatever else. And so like I get to where I'm oncoming, and that's when I would go back and work out during the oncoming meal, because that was the only time I could. And half the time I didn't even do that. Like I get out of shape every time I'm operational on a submarine because I prioritize sleep over fitness. Like most of the Navy.
That's the point, right? It's like, and that's where the COBs, the CMCs, all the senior enlisted need to engage the senior officers and go, okay, where's the trade-off, right? So what administrative thing that we talked about that's full of bullshit, frankly, should we trade off to clear us 30, 45 minutes that we can invest in physical fitness, which it's not just about, being able to do my job and warfighting readiness, but it's long-term health. It's friggin' sleep fitness. It's
mental
all that
health
stuff.
Yeah. Resilience.
I think a lot of that is just the mixed bag of priorities depending on who you talk to and who is in charge at the whatever the case is, right? So like one person, their priority is getting all their Excel check boxes green, and somebody else's is I want everybody to be fit, and then somebody else's I want CTQS to be great and whatever. And so like that's why to continue that joke that we just need a good war.
And I think
then
a lot of it's driven,
is war fighting.
A lot. It'll change. Yeah. A lot of it's driven too by even if you had a really like the world's best triad on a unit level that wanted to prioritize all those things, if anything falls behind, the first thing that they're going to take a shot at is your culture of fitness that is so important, that's taking away from your ability to train and like do stupid meetings and like critiques or pre-watch briefs or whatever the hell we're talking about. It's like whatever onerous mechanism you removed is going to be the first thing that they're going to be, oh, well, you're not doing what everybody else is doing, and you're prioritizing this culture of fitness crap, and that's why you're not prepared to like ace this certification in a trainer or whatever. And that's what's tough, is that at a pre-deployment certification where you're up with talking to the Commodore and the squadron CMC, it's like that's the first time, like the first thing, the easy target is going to be whatever you're doing differently than other units. And it's like, so you kind of have to be perfect or like better than everyone else because you're doing things differently. Otherwise you're going to get punched in the face and return to the status quo, even if you have the world's best triad. And that's the depressing part, is like Paul was saying earlier with how the precepts drive behavior. It's like, so does upper echelon's priorities. Like if the Commodore or the Admiral are releasing these priorities and none of them talk about those things aren't going to be prioritized. If the Admiral releases priorities that say physical fitness, mental health, and all this other stuff are the priority, it's going to be an important thing. Like it's known in my AOR that if the Admiral rides your submarine, he's going to do a sanitation inspection of the galley. And that's like one of my favorite things about that man, is how supportive he is of food service. And it's just like that. It's a statement. If he's going to devote, a 2-star is going to devote his time to walking through the galley with a flashlight, like, yes, like, thank you, sir. It's like, even if it's just for show and he has no idea what he's looking at, which he does, because when he was a Commodore, he got burned by some units not doing a good job at that. But he
also has a kitchen at home.
He does. Leadership, but that doesn't make you an expert. I'll play that silly
leadership presence matters, right? Where you go, when you go, for what matters, because it signals what's important. And frankly, on the Naval Institute side, there's an article in the From the Deck plates where a first class writes about this kind of stuff, right? Assessing lethality. And he talks about PT, and there's challenges to that. But hey, here's what I do know. I got to head out here soon, but you guys have teed up several great articles. You need to frame these out and submit them to Proceedings Magazine.
We all owe you an article. I know. Yes. It's on my to-do list. I'm going to do it. I just haven't yet. Discipline.
I'm here to help you shape that article.
I know. Just start incessantly texting me. Permission granted to just bug the ever-loving crap out of me. I'll do it.
There's an essay contest coming up, right?
I know. I simultaneously want to be like, hey, Paul, when are we updating the Chief Petty Officer's Guide? Because I want to be in on that. But then I can't even write you an article. So
yes, you do. Yes, that's a requirement to entry. So there is an essay contest.
A prerequisite.
Yeah, that's the 100 series for book writing. So there's an essay contest.
Now I'm motivated. Let's do it.
$3,000 to win the essay enlisted prize essay contest. That's not bad bank.
Ready, go.
So that could be. You got a lot of great stuff you're talking about here. This isn't all BS. This is valid stuff. So I'd like to see that conversation elevated.
Awesome. I'm in. What are you going to write about, Bob? How little time you have to write?
It's going to be, you're going to get what's the Japanese poem? 575.
Oh, a haiku.
There you go. You're going to get a haiku. That's about all I got time for.
Writing in pencil, writing in crayon with the wrong hand because that's what was accessible. I dig it. All right. Well, thanks, boys. I appreciate your time.
No, this has been good.
Benji, we'll do one where you actually open your mouth more than 3 times. We'll bring of course. You on I'm again. Here for you. We'll drag you on for the next Ask the Chief so that there's a little more bandwidth.
Definitely.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. All right. I hope you enjoyed that. Those friends catching up, and then we actually got to tackle some of those things. Again, I think the TikTok Chief thing, as we talked about it, I kind of discovered that I need more information to fully form any kind of opinion or thought on it or whatever. And I think a lot of that is not having the perspective of the person that did it. So that's something that I plan on reaching out soon. I keep saying, I've got it written down. I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I've got a lot going on right now. But I intend to do that. And then, the rest of it, I hope you enjoyed. The rest of the Q&A questions I will get to. As always, if you need anything from us, hit us up. dgutspodcast@gmail.com. You can Facebook message us, dgutspodcast, or you can DM me on Instagram or Reddit at dgutspodcast. Engage on Reddit. I'm active on our Navy. Also, I post the episode all over the place, and then in our own little sub, DGuts Podcast, you can come in there and talk a little bit as well. And then, if you want to support us, there's some exciting stuff coming with that in mind. I'm working on what's going to, in effect, be an apparel brand. It'll be an extension of the podcast, but it's something that I've thought about for a long time. I'm inspired by the guys at Test Depth and Tommy over at 15 Fathoms and stuff like that about just making pride gear that you actually want to wear in public. That's kind of the catchphrase that I'm rolling with right now, but it's something I've been interested in a while, and I'm playing around with it. It's probably going to take me a while to actually get it fully up around, but something to look for. DGuts Apparel, it's coming. But if you want to support us right now, go to dgutspodcast.com/shop. You can get t-shirts, stickers, buttons, all kinds of stuff. Coins are on my life's to-do list. And just you get something and it helps us pay the bills. It's not for profit at this point. It's just to help support the cost of like the Squarespace space site and the SoundCloud Pro account and all the other, I'm sure there's other subscriptions, Zencaster subscription, all the stuff that help make the podcast happen. It helps me come out of pocket less, and then you get something to kind of show your support for the podcast. So it's a win-win. So hook up some gear. dgutspodcast.com/shop, and that's it. That's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening, and don't give up the ship.